Okay, so here I'm going to be driving back to Syracuse, and I'll try to talk a little slow, because even though it's been like 5 days, I can still feel it a little bit. Especially, I don't want talking to be the reason why something messes up with my touch. So, the thing is that and so what that means is that, let me review Rochester a little bit. One thing is, I mean, I've been here a number of times before, but there's a lot of Tim Hortons here that aren't in Syracuse. There's only like one that I ever see in like a gas station, but there's a ton of them here. They even have like this big like almost like an ice skating rink that it was called like Tim Hortons something. That's what it seemed like, or like this huge building that couldn't have just been a regular store. So I don't know, but they have a ton of those here, and it's also not the best kind of area from my, just, again, I'm not trying to be rough areas, I'll just say. Both in terms of the roads, and it just seems, it is what it is, but like it's got some issues. Not saying Syracuse and everywhere doesn't, but it stood out a little more to me this time for some reason. So like there's huge cop presence today. There was some big event that was happening, like big road being blocked off, not like an event, but like a crime or something happened that obviously there was a huge bridge closed and stuff like that. And so whatever, you can't really myopically say that, but it seems to rank a little bit lower than some of these other cities that we could look at. To me, like Binghamton is very clean, very safe, very small compared to it. Binghamton's in a much more narrow field. Like it doesn't go as far. Rochester's a little bigger. And then Syracuse is wide as heck if you include some of the areas that people sometimes do. Like all the way from North Syracuse to like pretty much anywhere. Like it's so insanely wide that like people will call it Syracuse even if it's not really Syracuse, right? So that area is kind of humongous, but what you kind of want is whatever. Albany was pretty good actually. I liked what I saw there. It looked so good at night that I wish I had streamed at night the one time. You got like a really nice visuals. The daytime can be a little boring sometimes. Right? It's almost like things stand out a little more, or there's less people around. It's kind of nicer driving. So let's talk about some critical thinking skills. So this is almost what I should do in the long term, is like I'll open my own school or lesson plan of teaching objectivity and critical thinking. And one of the things you could do with that is like let's try to define sort of what they are and what the point of it would be. When you critically think, you would be well, let me do objective first, since that's one of my mission statements of my whole debate format and this kind of discussion. Being objective would mean sort of observing things, right? You observe something and it just is. So in a way, it'd be sort of bland or boring or not especially useful. It would just be an objective reality, an objective fact. But if you're concerned with truth, that would be the case, right? You would just be, okay, that would just speak for itself. You don't have any incentive, you don't have any selective sort of spin or skew on it. And one of the things that happens with that is again, that's most of what human history and behavior is kind of like, how can every era of human history spin and skew certain things, even like this generalized thing that's kind of dumb, where they'll say like valuing human beings, right? Like Oh, in the city. Oh, this is gonna be an impossible turn to make. What is with all these bikes just on the ground? Okay. Look. Here's one concept I'll just introduce as we're discussing this. Every era that you're in will condemn the new age of the machination process, which is like the net sum of technology in an era that defines the way of life, etc., right? To which people are reactionary, nurture versus nature. It's more about what they're exposed to and how. Where, okay, like right now, AI is bad. Some, people have some reservation. AI is bad, and people are going to condemn it. Now, without taking a position on that, I'm not saying whether it's bad or not. But what I mean is, we'll be aware of that. Oh no, this thing was made by AI, and everything's fake now. Everything's AI now. We'll say that, but we won't say, oh, what we can, that we accept. That form of contrivance and machination process, because make no mistake, that's a form of technology. That's a form of, literally dressing something up. We accept that form of artifice. That's just default for us. But the new form of artifice, oh no, that stands out because we're not yet conditioned and trained to it. So you see how that works? So in a previous era, people would have said the same thing. All these fancy clothes are distracting us from our inherent selves and whatever. Or all this technology, phones, right? So it's weird. Every era resists the new age of technology as if it's the problem, but don't realize that what they're already doing was the same thing. Right, it's just another layer, another step. So if you're truly against it, don't say AI is bad. Say that filters are bad. Say that makeup is bad. Say that everything is bad. Right, clothing is even bad. That's the thing. We haven't yet been conditioned to accept AI the way that we have been to accept everything else. But like again, previous generations would have said the same thing. Oh, all these kids now with their phones. All these kids now with their rock music. All these kids now with their TV shows. All these kids now with their whatever. Right. It doesn't mean that you're, but what happens is, it's your own unfamiliarity with it. So if you were to look at everything objectively from like a natural standpoint, you would say, look at all of these things that we accept and take for granted and even teach and train our children to acquiesce to that are not inherent, that are not natural, that are not, universal, but yet we do that. Doesn't mean they're good or bad, qualified empirical authority, state, whatever. But what you understand is that it's basically you got to get on a good stretch of road before I can really do this. But or how could Rome have fallen to bread and circuses and things like that? We're very quick to identify it as something like that, or even in fiction, right? So when it's in fiction, we can see it. When it's in history, we can see it. When it's in other societies, we can see it. But we can't see it in ourselves, which is kind of an analogy to the human perception, right? We're in first-person view, if you want to use, video game language, first-person POV, comfortable with it, right? Oh, if you hear your own voice recorded, you might be uncomfortable. Or if you really observed yourself, right, it would make you uncomfortable. Like that social media chick watching, performing, is doing exactly the same thing. So it's like self-awareness is the enemy somehow, even though is what you're doing good or not? Do you have an issue with it or not? Right? Not saying whether you should have an issue with it or not. It's just, it shouldn't make a difference whether someone else is seeing it or whether you're seeing it. If it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. And I gotta, when I go to places like this, I gotta do like a landmark check. Like, what is the most noteworthy places to go? But I don't like to get out and do stuff like that. We gotta introduce Pokemon Go as we're doing this shit. I'll be the world #1 Pokemon Go player just because I travel so many places, assuming they give you benefit for that. That'll be the pretense or excuse that somebody needs, right? Oh, you won't travel the world just because it's on your bucket list or do something else. You'll do it only because, Pokemon Go makes me do it or something. like being an achievement hunter in WoW or something, I would be the type completionist who wants to fill out the map just to do it, right? Just because I want to do it. Whereas, then achievements came out, now you get an achievement for it, now you do it. Never mind that that's a false sense of achievement even in the game that doesn't do anything, but even the game itself isn't real, so it doesn't matter. It's like you're doing it for your own psychological reason, but there's like people need a pretend. That's a Kodak moment, right? That's kind of a strong thing. It's not actually, doesn't actually mean anything the way that, it became associated with it. So, sees with this, where, you see a lot of fallacies with it where people, there's the Tim Hortons I was talking about. There's a ton of them. There's a lot of okay, this is a cool little landmark, whatever the heck it's even supposed to be, I don't know. The project funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, where did we go through that? Joe Biden Avenue or something? That was like as we're going from Scranton or something. Yeah, opposite interpretation concept I could use here too. Like, there's not a fixed meaning of something, right? That's all subjective. So you could present something, but then you could say, well, it's all up to interpretation. What you can tell somebody how to do something. You can't really tell them what to do, because what if they don't value that? What if that's not something they want? You could try to hide behind this collective thing, right? Like, for a mass number of people, you have to be dehumanized. It's kind of a clever trick. There's a mass of people, and to account for them, we have to dehumanize everybody else. But the absolutists would easily observe that they aren't responsible for that mass of people. They didn't create them, right? And they, in fact, would not preserve the stimuli acme. Ergo, if everyone was like them, it wouldn't be overextended in that manner. And so using that as a pretense to control someone is not valid. So now what you have is like the way that you would look at society or anything is everything is conditional. Everything is, okay, it might serve a purpose, it's a necessary end, somewhat arguably, but you're always trying to remove the need. Ideally, you would self-govern. Ideally, you wouldn't need government at all, or very, very small, minimalist amount. But instead, the perception is flipped to constantly wanting benefits and bribes and things. And so the other thing that happens is the fact that it's not actually that far from Syracuse. Actually, like an hour 20. Okay, so what I'm saying is that objectivity is just the inherent objective reality. There's not just one fixed, selective, myopic interpretation. Objectivity is boring, it's not useful, right? It just is. It's the truth, it's the reality. But the absolutists would value that because then you can look at the objective reality and then decide what to do with it. Instead of this constant contrivance state where, oh no, we can't face the objective reality, we have to censor it, we have to frame it, we have to skew it, we have to overcompensate. And as a result of doing that, then only are we at peace with a contrivance state that otherwise we wouldn't be if we were aware of it, or if we have just the reality of what's going on, the process, the state, every action in your life, every experience. That is not of concern to the mass populace of the world, right? It doesn't matter because you just accept and concede that the way things are the way things are meant to be. So now it doesn't come about qualifying them in the first place, whether it be governments, corporations, lifestyle, anything. You just mindlessly go along with it and treat it as absolute. And now you're more concerned with how it's presented to you. Well, if it appears good on the surface, if it sounds good, if it looks good, initial minded kind of basis, if you have the right performative aspects, then you care more about the presentation of it, which has nothing to do with the objective reality of it. But that's what most people care about and are controlled by very easily. even as the conflict of contrivance still rears its head, and you have to do all these things which indicate it's not absolute, that you have to cover up for it with appearances and overcompensate with undue emphasis and all these kind of social, emotional, other kind of things. But what happens is the simple fact that again, so you would look at the objective reality, and then would you be at peace with that or not, is the question. And so if you make people self-aware, it's your fault, they shoot the messenger, or even just thinking itself is attacked as an enemy. Oh, you got to take these drugs to accept modern society, and it's like, you know, people need these drugs to cope with modern society, which didn't exist before, but now they become treated like a necessity, or we have these labels and different things, right? Doesn't that indicate a fault of the society itself potentially? That, oh, maybe it's a flawed process, but, you know, why would you need drugs or alcohol or all these things which indicate it's not absolute? But no, everything would be conditional, so you would constantly hold it accountable. It's for this functional basis, so you make sure, well, it could be done better, and that would invalidate the specific that's being presented, but it's used as a false absolute pretense. Like, we're doing this in the name of some zero-sum functional end, you know, productivity, but what if you did it better than by that same criteria, or what if you don't require it to be done, you know? But that's not how it's treated. There's like this lust of zero-sum reaction relief that I always talk about that is forced on other people. You're forcing your exuberance on other people and access for technology and different things that you don't need, or you're forcing your greed and materialism on them, or you're forcing your laziness on them, that you want everything to be kind of machination process convenient. You're not even letting them be free in nature anymore. Right. This seems like progress, but in a weird way, right? You're forcing it. Again, it indicates that people are concerned with the appearance of something, which again has nothing to do with the reality. It could not, but again, oftentimes appearances are carefully curated just to misguide you, mislead you. Look no further than dictatorships and propaganda and China and different media systems, right? So why would you treat that as credible? But the other part of that was like the subversive. There were two things I said. Well, let me see if it's in 720 or not anymore either. It is now. There were. Oh no, I didn't mean to do that. It doesn't let me manually choose this. What is going on? Wait, they got rid of the option to manually choose quality. Whatever, I don't care. What I'm saying is that it's either subversive, where people concede a non-value state as absolute and now it becomes about overcompensating for it or presenting it in a certain way. And the other part of it, I think I was saying that was it's almost like a bread and circuses idea, that like it's more about just the overcompensations and the zero-sum means that people get. So it doesn't matter, right? If in World War II Germany gave you enough bread and circuses, you would tolerate it, is what it indicates. Or if, you know, whatever, as long as you have that, you'll tolerate anything. The problem with that perception is that you're doing it in service of a specific contrivance state. And what that means is you might be content with your life, but the absolutist would frame it differently. They could be content sleeping on the ground in the woods and picking berries, and like they could be content with basically nothing. So there's no basis to infringe upon their inherent freedom, because okay, if the basis is some functionalism or zero-sum means, then they could sacrifice that and then they'd be free. this is the best way to maybe describe what an absolutist is in sort of layman's terms. Even though they defer to society somewhat because they've been indoctrinated in youth and they go along with that, or at least they're aware of how overextended it is, they would constantly be looking at everything like trying to remove the need. If you say, okay, you have to do this thing for this zero-sum purpose, like it's like the Sisyphus concept of pushing the boulder up and down. Everything in life is just, you just do it just so you can do it again. So is there a way to remove the need? And that, ironically, that's kind of how technology and machination process and human progress is sort of manifested anyway, is that, just the fact that that's all it does anyway, if you really look at it. What has technology done except for take what we already have in a zero-sum way and just extend it or expand it or make it easier or more convenient, right? Not to diminish that, but it's not like there's a higher measure of work, right? It's the same thing. It's like, right, it's the same zero-sum measure. So if you sacrifice that, you could be free. So in other words, you infringe upon an absolutist's inherent freedom or a human's inherent freedom. And what does that mean? It means that if you pose like some zero-sum means, basically you say, we do this for money, or we do this for zero-sum means, or we do it for functionalism, productivity. Okay, the absolutists would do it then so well and now no longer have to do it, let's say, or they might not require it at all. Okay, then I just will be a minimalist and I don't need as much or anything, so now I don't have to be a part of the system or controlled by it. But that's kind of the non-consensual way that you're controlled, is like, even if you do that, you're still subject to it, right? Even if it doesn't apply to you, you're still subject to it. And also the same thing comes with, so again, that would be absolutism or minimalism. Either way, you're never like, let's do all this stuff and then we'll reinforce the contrived state that we're in at the end of the day, society or government or corporations or whatever. No, it's like, let's do it so well that we no longer have to do it anymore, or we remove the need for the structure at the top of it. Not to reinforce or overcompensate for that structure, but like, okay, that structure was conditional, maybe it seemed necessary at the time, but if we do it better, then we no longer need it. But it's just a mindless mass of people who concede to it collectively. Because everything is a choice, right? There's not like this thing, you're just born smart or this or that. So much of it is created behavior, because that's why we're indoctrinated in youth so much. That's why, so people never have the freedom or the choice to actually try to do anything. They don't think, right? It's not about being smart, it's about thinking. Anybody can think, but people are trained not to do it. So now, the measure basis I was talking about is like as follows. You would say, sorry, I'm just not feeling too good because of the mouth. I don't want to exert it too much, but so here's the thing. Everything would be conditional and for a reason, and subjective and flawed, imperfect human beings. This is why false absolutes are posed like God, because without them, then it's one subjective person's view versus another. Even if they say, in order to achieve this certain end, you should behave in this way, there's no basis to force that on other people, because you could have a different goal. Okay, they want a society with a ton of people in it, and for that you have to subversively sacrifice a lot. You might not want that, so you want a minimalist commune or something small so that you don't have to sacrifice those freedoms or whatever. It could be a difference of intention. So how can you force your intention on other people? That's number one. Or even just the subjective nature of it, like it's your word against theirs. So even if there's more people on one side, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that they're right at all. In fact, the fact that that's necessary, just the raw number, almost could indicate not necessarily the opposite for sure, but it's like the fact that you have to rely on that means it could be anything. A majority of people could go along with anything, as we've seen throughout history. That didn't make World War II Germany right, but it doesn't make China right now, in any whatever sense you want to use. Like, though people will go along with anything, or at least they'll be sort of meek and easily controlled in that way. Right, whether you directly blame them or whatnot, but so getting back to the one point is the fact that nobody actually thinks about what they're doing and defines it that way. They more so just concede to it and react. So now it becomes about the framing of it, the presentation of it. As long as the appearance is good, we don't question the false absolute behind it. Or it's also about, like, again, reacting to it, or like some zero-sum means basis, like, as long as you have your bread and circuses, and as long as everything looks good on the surface, you won't question it. But the absolutist isn't concerned with such things because they're inherent in nature anyway. Right, that's a means validation fallacy. Like, okay, we're going to starve people out, whether it be children when they're young, when we disallow children from going outside without our permission, so they couldn't hunt or fish for themselves or whatever they could do, right? Could be a lot more capable than you give them credit for. You don't allow them to do that. You allow corporations to monopolize nature itself, and then you say, oh, but you rely on us for food, and we're going to starve you out if we, or whatever, similar things, and we're going to starve you out if you don't do what we say. So you realize that's the same methodology that dictatorships use. Oh, we're going to put you in jail, just force, raw force that you're accountable to and subject to. It's like starving somebody out doesn't make you right. Having a monopoly over resources doesn't make you right. It just means a collective mass of mindless people who you aren't even necessarily a part of, right? Your previous generation conceded nature itself to big corporations because they're mindless and lazy and weak sheep. And now you're subject to that, and you have to appease them or suffer from them. So make no mistake that that's an unnatural state. It doesn't validate anything. So now what happens is, and you even prevent the alternative or the freedom. It's like, oh, if you don't want to live in our house, go live in the woods. And then I have a scene in a short story. This is the start of an adventure, actually. And then they say it kind of tongue-in-cheek, like they're saying it jokingly, but he actually does it. And then it leads to a series of comedy of events that they don't know. They say it, but you didn't mean it, right? You lied to him. Because now they go looking, and now they try to, send the cops, and like, oh, he's trespassing here. Like, they won't really let you do that. You always have to acquiesce to contrivance in some way. So one of the other things that happens is the fact that I was saying basically, this is weird. Yeah, it's been like a week, and I'm still not feeling like I can really talk much. I just have to like whisper or something. I don't know. Which is hard to do in the car, at least. I could do it on my computer better. But yeah, people concede to a non-value subversive state, and it's more about overcompensation. So getting back to objectivity again, it's concerned more with the truth and the inherent nature of it. And again, the absolutists would have that conditional reality of like, okay, we'll defer to this government, society, corporation for now, but the goal is to remove the need. The goal is to become self-sufficient or whatever we need to do. So what's the premise of it? Like, okay, the premise is for our safety. So let's be safe enough on our own and be disciplined enough on our own that we don't need that. We can be self-governed. Or, again, for zero-sum means, functionalism, let's be either minimalist to remove the need, or let's stockpile, let's have an excess of means, as the government does to falsely validate itself with means validation. And then, Right, so that's what it means, is that basically why is it called the freeway? Because it's free, and then you run into tolls that are paid. Like, one of those things you might not really think about, but obviously one of the many things you take for granted. Like, don't I pay taxes for the roads in this country? I love that. Like, you pay taxes for the roads, but you also pay tolls for the roads. Like, which is it? I pay sales tax at the grocery store, and then you also pay income tax and tax, later on that same thing. So it's this double taxation, like. But again, people mindlessly accept it. At the very least, you might say you don't have the ability to impact it, but it doesn't matter. You would still hold that in your awareness. That's like the absolutist gaze, or the, like, you'll go along with it for now, but you always have in your mind, like, oh no, I see the reality of this. I see the inconsistency or the unqualified state. I see it, despite, you always hold on to that instead of treating the initial euphemized kind of contrivance as absolute. And so one of the things that happens is the fact that there's a lot of assuming of intent that goes on with society and contrivance that way. As if, again, direct truth, neutrality, objectivity is a bad thing or a threat. Again, because it's boring, because you need some overcompensation, or it's somehow negative, or something lacking, because you're basically used to it. You're used to that artifice, but the fact that that's necessary is an imbalance. It's like, oh, it's negative. What is this road, dude? What is this? Jesus Christ, man. Look, it'd be like, oh, it's this person's fault for not overcompensating for this flawed process, because if you face it for what it was, then you would have issue with it, basically. But what I'm saying is that again, objectivity is not useful. It's not exciting. It's boring. It's bland. But it's an objective reality. And then you would look at that and then decide for yourself. So basically, what it tells you is that if everybody, or the average person, thought deeply and fully and objectively about everything and was self-aware and didn't have constant distractions, contrivance, it's really the initial layer is what I talk about with this. Is like, the initial layer, meaning you deal with the symptom, not the disease. You would have an issue with your contrivance state, and you wouldn't be at peace with it, but because it's so well established, doesn't validate it, but you just concede to it. And so now it is reinforced constantly, which could apply to anything China, something you disagree with. But because like the social order of a society and the government and stuff like that is tied together, right? It's not like you're doing that in service of that, even if you try to separate. So the thing is that you look at the objective reality and then you decide for yourself what to do with it. And the reason why that's relevant is because it indicates that people wouldn't uniformly do exactly what they're doing right now if they did think about it. So what do? Do they objectively think about it and then decide for themselves what to do? No, because I know that would give them cognitive dissonance, because they concede to the non-value subversive state and react to it mindlessly, assuming intent, which is fine. You're kind of accepting that you're a trained animal and just, okay, there is nothing. It's just a zero-sum process, but even that zero-sum process you're not free to do fully. So you're basically, in practice, conceding a non-value subversive state, which is again, arbitrary. It can be pulled in any direction. That's why the non-basic self comes into it. Like, that's all it is zero sum, and then half gratification, subversive, specific reinforcement, which also ties to like the objective standard basis of it, that it might be projected like, oh, you're selfish or something, but you could value people as the basis of amalgam theory, or fully, or absolutely, or the same standard, or the thought objective standard basis. So it's more about the consistency and the rational basis of it, not about you, right? You're not doing it for yourself. There's no benefit in being objective that way. In fact, it'd be like you'd often be shunned in society for it, or you'd often be like you would get rewarded for going along with it and the contrivance state and not questioning it. So the thing that happens is actually something different, that is like an ego projection. The mass collective are ruled by their own ego in a half-mass way. So if you're using a non-ego basis, they'll still try to attach that, like, oh, this guy thinks he's so smart, or oh, this guy. What if it's not about that? There is no ego in anything. Everything's just zero-sum process. You're just trying to objectively observe it, where other people do not, because they're trained a certain way. They're victims of contrivance, whatever. But you're just objectively observing it. So there is no ego in that, but they project it as if you need the permission of ego to do it. Like, oh, you would have to be some millionaire or something or whatever to be able to justify doing that. But it's kind of the same thing, right? The objective nature of it. That why should that require any special thing? Right? You're treating thinking as outward, or like some special thing somebody's doing, not just a default normal thing that people would naturally do. And you're also treating it for, like, again, what people do is they don't validate the state, they indicate the conflict of contrivance therein. That it's not absolute, that it is flawed, but they distract themselves with alcohol, with drugs, with escapism, entertainment, thought favoritism. So that, again, you could say is somewhat a Jungian principle of the archetypes. Again, I haven't read about that in many, many years, but like, whatever, I'll make a tie-in, even though that's not what this is about at all, and this is something I discussed before I really thought about that, but I never made the connection, but I'll make some weird association fine, just because people are preconceived sheep and they need some point of association. But the overlap there would again be, you see the sign of it not being absolute. So, oh, it's an absolute contrivance state, you're at peace with it, everything's perfect. But then, oh, you have to drink and smoke and do drugs and distract yourself with entertainment, so escapism, etc. So and you have constant social conflict and other things, right? That would indicate, oh, it seems absolute on the surface, but all those things you're doing that you treat as sort of normal or default are actually indications of the flaws of that state, right? If it was a sound process, you would be at peace with it, and then you wouldn't need to drink, you wouldn't need to distract yourself, you wouldn't need to do all those things, right? So those are direct indications of a flaw or a conflict within that process of, like, right, definitely an imbalance that you're overcompensating for, which by that logic you could do that in any case then, okay. But if you were in China right now, you might just have to drink a little more to deal with the cognitive dissonance of that, or like it doesn't lend itself to a credible state. Like, oh, you're like, let's look at it as an individual basis, right? You, whoever, right, some hypothetical person, you let's look at a day in the life of an average person in the U.S. or wherever, right? You wake up, you go to work, you do your job, you get your money, right? You come home, you party with friends, or you drink, right? You watch some TV, you go to bed, you engage in the stimuli acme and half-mass hedonism with your sexual partner, whatever. Stimuli acme specification, am I right? But basically, you do all that, and it's like, what parts of that would indicate some imbalance? Like, if you were at peace with what you're doing, right? This is what I call, like, being your every action you do would be concerned with your survival directly, right? Let's say you're living out in the woods, right? You wouldn't have access to a lot of those things, but you also might not have the need or desire for them. You're living out in the woods, you're picking berries, you're hunting, you're fishing, you're doing some basic things. But but everything that you're doing would be concerned with your survival more directly. What you have in society instead is overextension. Like, well, you're doing this thing that isn't directly tied to what you're getting out of it, and it's in service of some big company and some other overextended thing. So it's like, oh, you're sitting at an office desk and you're working on a computer, so you're not directly getting the food that you're eating, right? So it creates this disconnect between what you're doing, and that was such an unnecessary thing this guy just did, man. But no, so there's a disconnect there that causes cognitive dissonance, and it makes you question, like, well, maybe you don't really want to do it this way. You would want it to be direct, but you're not allowed to generally because you're not that free. And the other aspect of this comes back to what I was saying before, like, okay, if you can indicate the things that show an imbalance, like you're watching TV, right, or playing a game, or any form of entertainment, that has no impact on your life whatsoever in terms of a productive basis, whether it be for more zero-sum means, for money, etc., or whether it be for even any other purpose. You might think you would justify that or treat it as default, but there's nothing about doing that that really would make sense, right, or lend to your credibility. So anybody who engages in entertainment and escapism, which again we all do to some extent, I do, I'm not trying to personalize it, but what I'm saying is there's no credibility in doing that, because like, how can you tell other people what to do if you drink and you do drugs and stuff like that? Not from like a moral standpoint, like that's wrong. It means like you have to dumb yourself down, but we're supposed to take what you say seriously. You have to distract yourself with entertainment and things that have no impact on your life, but we're supposed to take you seriously. And so it's kind of like, why would that be necessary, right? Whereas again, this is the whole analogy I sometimes use. The guru sitting in the woods, living in a minimalist little hut, right? It's not that they're perfect or above you or anything like that. It's that it's kind of something I've said when debating a Christian before. It's like if you were Amish or more minimalistic, that would at least be more consistent with the Bible or something like that, right? Not because necessarily of what you're doing, but because of what you're not doing. Meaning, it doesn't say in the Bible to drive a car. It doesn't say in the Bible to watch TV. It doesn't say in the Bible to do a lot of the modern things and trappings of technology, right? You could say it doesn't say not to do them, but that's not really how it would work. It doesn't say to do those things. So the Amish person is more consistent, not because, again, of what they're doing necessarily, although their lifestyle would be arguably more consistent too, like what they actually are doing. But they're not doing a lot of the things that you do in modern society that it doesn't say to do in the Bible, right? So it's the same thing here. Like, by being a minimalist, it doesn't mean they're better than you. You overextend everything. You say, like, like I said, there's the disconnect between, you might value something, but you still have to go through a big corporation for whatever you do. So no matter what you believe or what you think, it doesn't matter. The corporations always win. The middlemen always win. They're always in power, right? So your opinions really don't matter. Your lifestyle, your beliefs, it's all irrelevant. You're still going to have the Coca-Cola company rule the world. You're still going to have Exxon, and they win no matter what, right? So your impact is separate from that. It doesn't affect that. It could affect that if people really boycott or think about it a bit more, but... And there's another fallacy to go along with that. Basically, it's like, it's the established structure versus nothing, right? Like almost like an anarchy fallacy. If you were to criticize the established structure, whatever it is, corporations or government or otherwise, it's like, oh, so what do you want? There to be just total lawlessness and anarchy and stuff like that. Like nothing versus what we currently have. We accept blindly what's current, or we just say, tear it all down, right? That must be what you want to do. It can't just be that, okay, it's a flawed process, let's do it a little better, right? But that's how the tide to benefits comes in. Like, well, look at all these nice luxuries we have in modern life, so how can you complain? But it's kind of like, by that same process, it can be done better. So don't use the bread and circuses to shirk accountability from it, right? Because people can be very tolerant and very easily pleased, so it doesn't take much. I give them little welfare checks and they won't revolt. That's kind of the whole principle in the modern times. But that's the thing. There's no basis or credibility in the people who engage in folly, favoritism, and alcohol and stuff like that, and distraction. And on the basis of that, those people serve to self-create and uphold in service of the current power structure. And so that current power structure has no credibility, because the people who are upholding it need to distract themselves and aren't doing it from a place of thought and reason and objectivity and choice. And therefore, there's no basis to outwardly insist that upon other people, right? That would be the difference. The minimalist living in the hut isn't outwardly insisting or telling anybody else what to do. They're trying to minimize everything in their life. So even like, oh, nobody owns land, it's just nature, it's free to all. So even they, in their little hut, would be, again, this like amalgam theory, they would be very welcoming to other people, and they would try to take up as little space as possible, and they would try to use as little resources as possible. So it's not even that they're right. This is maybe the best way to say it. It's not that they're right, it's that they're less wrong than you are, right? They're not right, but they're less wrong, because they're doing as little as possible, so that they're as little wrong as possible, or as little inconsistent as possible. So the more you do, the more you overextend, the more you consume, the more you do things in society, you engage in all these exuberant things, the more inconsistent you're being, because whatever standard you have, now you're contributing to major companies who do all kind of questionable things around the world that you might have issue with, child labor or ravaging the environment or polluting or whatever. Right? So the more you buy from big companies, the more you're doing that. The minimalist would minimize that and not do it, or do it as little as possible. The other point being, like government, you're paying taxes that go to war crimes and other things. Like, so you might try to hide from that responsibility and play dumb, but you're still playing into that, right? Like, whereas again, the minimalist is trying to avoid. So do as little as possible, and then at least you're at peace with it. Now you don't need to distract yourself, because you're just kind of at peace. It might be more now out of a place of boredom, but not as a place of reinforcing and distracting from a contrived state. And the other aspect of it was the fact that basically, whatever, I think I've made the point, like reinforcing, distracting, and you'd be more at peace, and you'd be more consistent no matter what your measure and lifestyle is, because that overextension is questionable. Where in your belief system or measure or what you value does it say, let me pay taxes to a government that does things that I likely would disagree with, at least some of them, or just put my hands up and give power? Where does your belief system say that, whether it be religion or otherwise? Where does it say that, we're going to prop up and reinforce these corporations that happen to exist at this time? Right, it's one thing to go along with it, but it's another thing to really vouch for it. So that would be, again, the absolutist holding and trust concept that I talked about before. Like, everything is conditional. So you'll say, pretend you're growing up as an absolutist. You have this in your mind, objectivity, non-ego-based, unconditional kind of reality. They'll tell you, do this because this. They're telling you what to do, and you hear the second part. You don't pay attention to what they're telling you to do. You hear the second part, because blank. They try to justify it. So now it's like, do this so that this. So then you try to remove the need. You say, well, does that really need to be done? Maybe we can do without it and be at peace with it. Right? So you try to remove the need so you can be free and less inconsistent and overextended. Or let's do it so well that we never have to do it again. Or do it so quickly and get it over with very quickly and efficiently. Right? Instead of this ego gratification that have massive doing it and training people and conditioning them like they're animals, like the animals they are. But yeah, now let's get back to the defining part of it, objective. I mean, all this relates to the topic, but I wanted to specifically lay it out a little more. So what happens is that you're trying to again, objectivity would be just concerned with truth. So there's the fallacy of, like, is morality objective? Is morality objective? I guess that's the main one that I sometimes have made fun of, how people say that, because sometimes religion will try to say that, like, morality is objective or inherent or absolute, but even though it is, so in their supposed view, it still requires subjective law enforcement, subjective lawmakers. It requires subjective police officers who, again, sometimes they make mistakes, sometimes they get the wrong guy, sometimes they abuse their power. So even if it was supposedly absolute or objective, it relies on subjective people for it, which in itself would not make it objective. So at least in practice, it's not objective, right? It's not objective like science, where, like, oh, you need oxygen to survive, right? That's objective because it doesn't come down to your opinion on it, or there's nothing to be gained from it. It doesn't depend on people, right, to enforce it the way that morality does. So it'd be hard to say that. It's subjective, but it requires subjective human enforcement and interpretation every step of the way. It changes over time throughout history. It's very conditional. It's very inconsistent. It can just be ignored by people at will. People can just choose not to follow it. Entire societies and governments can choose not to do it. Right, so whatever your subjective definition of morality is in this era, you'd have to explain away everything that was immoral throughout history. Like, oh, it was always absolute, but people just did immoral things anyway. So that's not really how objects are going to ignore that, and that makes me a bad person, I guess. But then I'll just not do it. But then you'll actually die. Or again, you can subvert it with technology, which people might bring up. But that's effectively still addressing the same need that you have to do that. Right, whereas again, morality would be more like a should statement. Like, okay, should you blank? Should you, you should or shouldn't do it. But somebody could just decide, okay, they're having a bad day or whatever the case may be, and they just do it anyway. If that's your standard of objectivity, fine, but that's not really how any other form of it would work, and it doesn't really have much power to it then. It's objective, but anybody can just randomly decide to do something else. So either way, it comes down to the subjective level of how we treat it or how we would do it. And then the final point is, again, just critical thinking. Critical thinking would be, I kind of want to take a break because I don't want to stress my mouth too much. Critical thinking, like, how would I describe it in more of a clear sense? Like, that you would be critical not just about the specifics of something, right, but like why you're even doing it. So not just the what, like, oh, how can we do the zero-sum process more efficiently? How can we solve this homework assignment? How can we do this task at work? But you'd be critically thinking outside of that too, about, you know, like, well, maybe authority and boss and other things are not absolute either, or maybe, you know, just it's not whatever. Like, you'd be questioning the why of it too, the makeup of it, not just the what or how to get to that zero-sum end. And so that was a nice drive. It still got about 40 minutes left, but how has it already been an hour then? It's not an hour 40 drive, but I guess maybe I'm going slower. It's meant to be more like an hour 20 drive. Alright, that's gonna be enough. Is this that Waterloo place? Oh wow, it is. the finger. This had the most pathetic food court ever. I had just been in there the other day. It was like, they have this super expensive place, this sip and slice, and they had some like crappy, they had nothing really interesting in there.